worked with some amazing directors in your career, Steven Spielberg, Steven Soderbergh, Robert Zemeckis. What is the first thing that, when you think of working with Christopher, that sort of differentiates him from them?
I've never worked with a better leader. I cannot say I've ever worked with a better problem solver. And half of the problems he just solves by pure will. That everything must keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. He never goes backwards. He never goes backwards. Whether he won't go reshoot anything, even if you found out something was wrong, I don't think he would reshoot it. Conceptually, he's able to realize things on screen, to actually put them up there in a larger and more awe-inspiring scope than any other director that I know or I've seen. Yet when we were shooting the personal stuff, which this film's full of, it felt like a small independent film. A few takes. He's not a perfectionist. I thought he was going to be a perfectionist. He's not a perfectionist. He actually wants the imperfections. And you take as much time as you need. But he also has a great sense of humor, which not many people know. He's got a killer sense of humor.
Which is really funny, because the other night I heard at the American Cinematique thing, he said that you actually, people think you just are sort of funny and carefree all the time, and he thinks of you as very serious.
He didn't find me funny at all, he said. Yeah. Well, we were both very serious. And in our seriousness came some of the things in hindsight that I found his humor to be really witty and dry. So, you know, it's a very personal story for him. His brother wrote it. His wife's producing it. He's got a daughter himself, you know. And I think it shows. I think it showed when I first read the script. I felt like he was going for something more personal that he'd even gone for before.
Watching the Q&A last night after the screening, and did you say, correct me if I'm wrong, that you took the project without reading the script, and that you didn't that you didn't meet Christopher until on set? Is that true?
No, I mean, sort of. I knew I was going to take the project before I read the script. Yes, of course they sent me the script, because you never know, like, I wanted to work on a Christopher Nolan film, and so when I got the call, I was like, of course I'll do it. Had I read it and it didn't make sense for the character, there was no arc or something, of course I would have had second thoughts. I loved the character, so I was there. It is true, we didn't meet until, the first time we met was a costume fitting. So it was weird, like, saying, hello, Mr. Nolan, while, like, there's other people around. So, you know, you don't really have the intimacy of a one-on-one conversation, which I think was really good for my character.
Because she's very isolated from all the other characters in the film.
I don't know if he did it on purpose. I know, but if he did, he's really is a genius.
Well, you've worked with so many genius directors, and I'm just curious, I asked the same question to Matthew, like, you've worked with Terrence Malick, you've worked with such great, you know, filmmakers, and, you know, Catherine Bigelow, like, what is he like compared to them? Like, what's the first thing you think about when working with Christopher compared to them?
Gosh, working with Christopher, you're there to work. There is no complaining. There is no, you're in extreme situations and you just go through it. Like Anne was in ice water, you know, up to her shoulders, whatever. She went through it. Matthew's on the glacier, not being able to look down because he's in the space suit. I was getting dust chucked in my face every day. And that's your job. You're doing it.
The X-Men movie, the first X-Men movie, really heralded the birth of this golden age of comic book movies. Do you now, whenever you see, you know, Chris Nolan at parties, go, you know what? You're just riffing on my act. We started this. Do you ever do that?
I don't talk to Chris. He's always trying to bother me and suck up to me, and
that guy
is a little annoying.
It's really annoying.
And so I'm like, I'm going to be stuck with Chris, and he's going to be offering me movies, and it's embarrassing to say no. I mean,
doesn't he wear suits to
what
work?
was that Inception movie? Ridiculous. He offered me that, and I was like, that script. I'm like, are you kidding me?
This is the sound of these guys just ripping up their careers. You can hear it. You can hear it in the background.
Interesting story about Chris. When we were doing The Prestige, this is a true story. He was telling me how one day he always had Batman in mind, and when he saw X-Men 1, he, of course he couldn't get it made back then. When he saw X-Men 1, he was like, that's my idea. This idea of making comic book movies real and human and dramatic and relatable in a way, not just based on the superhuman elements. And so he really gave it to Bryan, kudos to Bryan. He was like, that's what I wanted to do.
A project you got coming up soon is Interstellar,
yes.
Christopher Nolan as well. So you're what is it like reuniting with him?
Well, I was so flattered to be asked back. You know, I had such a wonderful experience working with him on The Dark Knight Rises. He's one of my favorite directors to work with, and I have a really good part, which he wrote. So I just couldn't have been more flattered. And it's great to work with your friends, and it's so wonderful to get to work on great movies. And so that, I'm blushing thinking about it, excuse me. So that one was just yes, joy, wonderful, pleasure all around.
Has it been different, kind of going from like a established superhero franchise onto something that's quite unique and original working with him? Has that changed the way you've worked at all?
Not really. I think, I got to see a little bit more of his process on Interstellar, just because in the Batman franchise I was walking into the third film and into a world that had already been established. And, something as simple as the visuals, the visual tone of the film had already been worked out, previously. So I got to see him kind of create more at the Inception level. And yes, I did just say Inception while talking about Chris Nolan.
Correct me if I'm wrong, this is your 5th time working with Christopher Nolan.
So it seems, yeah.
So it seems,
yeah.
What is it like working with him? How different is it working with him than it is to working with any other filmmaker?
Well, Chris has very sort of specific approaches to the work. Every director is different, but I suppose I've had the pleasure of working with Chris a few times now, so you get a sort of an insight into how he goes about it, and it's very, very rigorous. It's very sort of demanding on himself and on his crew and on his cast, and incredibly focused. His vision is so clear and so strong. You feel very confident, in sort of being part of that. And when he pushes it, it feels like a good place to be.
Definitely. And it really feels like watching his films that without him around or in the industry working today, there wouldn't be films like this being made on this scale at least. Does it feel like that when you're on set with the actors, when you're filming the scenes?
Well, I think people talk about Chris's films like they're on a big scale and that they're epic in nature, and which is certainly true. But always, in my experience, it's always the things that I remember is the sort of intimacy of the work together. Particularly in this film, we're on a little boat out in the ocean, and it's just 3 or 4 actors and Chris and the cameraman and the sound guy, and that's it. So it feels really intimate, and I know that around it there's this huge story unfolding. But that's been my experience in all of his films, really, just about the performances and about the work.
Would you ever work with Nolan, and did you see Tenet? What did you think of it?
Chris, call me, Chris.
What?
I'd love to work with Christopher Nolan. You kidding me? What's he doing? Oppenheimer, right?
Oppenheimer, yeah. What did you think of Tenet? It's out of curiosity.
It was too weird. First of all, we went to Chris's house, screened it in his theater.
No.
So I'm sitting here now I'm watching my son starring in a Christopher Nolan movie in Christopher Nolan's house. So there was a lot going on. I'm looking at my son and I'm like, he sounds like me. I'm like, of course he sounds like you, stupid. He is. There were so many things that I was experiencing that, as a father.
Because you seem to be a favorite.
Well, the first time we met, we talked about dreams for like an hour, and it was so interesting. And this man is so smart, and it was also, he was offering me something that I had never done before, and the 2 movies I've done with him were 2 very different experiences, I love working with him. I love being on his set with all the people he works with. He's a true artist, directing huge movies, which is very unique in a way that he writes the script. He's involved at every level of movie, and he's very inspiring too because he's so smart.
There's 2 directors I've worked with that don't allow cell phones on set, Darren Aronofsky and Denis Villeneuve, and both of them had exactly the same reason, which is exactly what you were saying. It's about intentionality. And both of them talk about the space being sacred. And he said, I don't care if you're 50 yards over there. I need you've done your job, you've set up the scene, you're not needed right now. If you're on the cell phone, it dissipates that energy, that intentionality of everyone is making this story.
But you've actually worked with 3 directors that don't allow cell phones.
Was Tom one as well?
No, Christopher Nolan.
Oh, no, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. Chris also doesn't allow chairs.
Doesn't he?
So I worked with him twice. Doesn't allow chairs, and his reasoning is if you have chairs, people will sit, and if they're sitting, they're not working.
That
and
is
he's
hilarious.
right. And he's right. And he winds up, I mean, he has these incredible movies in terms of scope and ambition and technical prowess and emotion, and always arrives at the end under schedule and under budget. So I think he's onto something with the chair thing.
And Chris rang my lawyer and he said, here's the thing. I understand people need a trailer if they're going to hang out in their trailer. He goes, but Christian Bale and Hugh will share a trailer. I promise he will never sit in his trailer for more than 1 hour. And I promise we are done at 7 p.m. every night and we'll be home. And I was like, I'm in. And he was true to his word.
This, my father accepts that I want to create for myself, not follow in his footsteps.
My work. Might. We need to do a little better than might.
Thank you for your contribution, Arthur.
Forgive me for wanting a little specificity, Ames. Specificity?
Christopher Nolan was the Sundance director who was making huge movies. That's the balance that I wanted to strike as an artist and as an audience member. Just the movies that I wanted to watch. I remember when The Dark Knight came out in 2008. And of course, it was steeped in tragedy because of Heath. It was such a brilliant movie, and it was brilliant in the same way that these movies that I grew up loving were brilliant. The ones I was talking about, Soderbergh and Tarantino, you know, all these movies that were so rooted in character and heart and soul and not in glitz and gloss. But Nolan was managing to bring that artistry to the grandest of, you know, to a Batman movie. Is the craziest magic trick that he was able to do that. When the opportunity arose to go meet Chris, I hadn't read the script for Inception at all. Because it was Chris, I was like, oh, absolutely. I don't know anything about this. I know that Leonardo DiCaprio is in it. That's it. I know it's Chris and Leo. I didn't know Leo at the time, so I wasn't allowed to call him Leo. Now I am. Now I can. I wasn't auditioning. I was just going to like meet him. And usually though, when I go to audition for something or even meet on a film, I sort of present myself in some kind of light such that the director could see me as that character. If I'm going to play, you know, a homicidal maniac from Texas, I'll go in, you know, with some stubble and like maybe a little drunk. I'll dress and sort of hold myself in such a way that it makes sense that I could play that character. This, I didn't know what I was going into. And so I just put on a suit. I was like, I'll just be as pro as I can be. And in Hollywood, you don't go into meetings in suits. No one wears a suit in Hollywood. But I wore like a full-on suit, tie, nice shoes, and went into the meeting with Chris being like, whatever you want, anything, tell me. We talked about movies, talked about Kubrick, talked about violence in movies. I remember telling him about sort of just myself and my family. And then he offered me the movie. I couldn't believe it. It's sort of the big surprise of my career in a way. I remember the first time I read the script, I came away with a lot of questions, but also the script for Inception did not allude to how involved, in particular, like I'm in this big dream fight sequence that sort of weaves through the whole second act of the movie or something. In the script, it's like one line of stage directions, like Arthur gets in a fight or something like that. And I remember as they started to present me with this fight sequence that I was going to learn, and I was introduced to these stunt coordinators and like talking about my schedule for training and things like that, I was like, And then it ended up being this funhouse of like, and the main thing I was doing with my life for months was like working out and like training, you know, kickboxing and then training on wires and balance and like all this stuff that was so fun. I had no idea. Even when I read the script, I didn't know that that's what I was in for.